Here's part one of the door actuator installation. First, I'm going to go over all the pieces that are needed. You need the actual door actuator, which I get these from Hatchmasters. They're in Illinois, they're nice and strong. They have, the pivot on there, so it mimics the door going up. Works really nicely. You're going to need something to mount this on. And I use an aluminum 90 degree and cut it down. It started with a 6-foot piece like this, and the top part just matches the size of the actual bracket that the actuator comes on, and the bottom part is 3 inches from here to here. You don't want it too big because it's going to actually turn inside the door, and you don't want it to hit the inside of the door or the outside of the door. You're going to need something. This is a self-lubricating sheet from McMaster. Just cut 3 inches, the size of the bracket under there, so it will slide on that instead of sliding metal to metal. And then you're going to need a piece of aluminum again for the mount. So the actuator mount's going to mount to the lower mount. This is going to mount to the bottom of the door, and it'll slide on the self-lubricating sheet versus the aluminum's aluminum. That way, over time, you won't be straining the actuator. So the first thing that has to happen is actually drill the holes for the actuator to mount on the top. So I've already done that. It's just a matter of putting that on there, drilling the holes, and then tapping them for 1/4 20. And then just with 1/2 inch 1/4 20 bolts, just mount the actuator on there. The actuators come left hand and right hand, so when you order them from Hatchmasters, you just order a pair. I think it's 39A, but you want to verify that before you. They're $130 a piece, the actuators. You can actually drill, there's enough room, you can drill all the holes for this bracket mount while the actuator is sitting on there. All right. On the end, it came with a bracket that's not going to work because this has to be able to swivel a little bit. So I got some rod ends here from McMaster, which you'll have to carefully drill and tap into this, and this is pretty strong steel in there. So what I did, I started with a very small drill bit and then just went one at a time all the way up. It's a 3/8 size thread, just so I didn't burn all the drills out and didn't break anything in there, and just threads in there. And you will need a bracket that will mount to the inside of the door frame. so that the rod end will go into it and be able to, and I use an auto lock mounting bracket for linear actuators. It's part number 13344, it says here on the bottom. Amazon has them, of course. So that's the actuator mounted. Now we need to mount the plate, the bottom plate, to the self-lubricating sheet, and you're going to see I drilled 1/4 holes and then used a countersink bit so this didn't interfere, because this is going to sit on the bottom of the door. We don't want bolt heads sticking up. You could use, drill it 1/4 and then use a big drill bit to make the hole. I'm going to do I use this in a lot of places, so I spent the $20 for the expensive bit. So you need some really short 1/4 countersink bolts. So I threaded the sheet, the self-lubricating sheet. It's going to be trapped in there, so I'm not worried, there's no structure to it. It's just to keep it from sliding away from the top sheet. So I'm going to tighten it a little bit, but not crank on it, so I strip it's not material. To make sure the bolts aren't sticking up. Clean them off, make sure, any metal in there will cause more friction than is needed. And then right at the midway point, both ways, I put in another 1/4 that's going to go up into the bracket up here, and then this thing is going to pivot on there, and it's got to be the correct length. I had a long one and cut it, and then what's going to happen is it can't back out because the bottom of the door is going to keep it there and it can't go any further in. So I've already tapped that hole, and it's just a matter of screwing it in. Again, not cranking this one because the plate has to be able to, you're a little strong in that one, so the plate doesn't want to turn. There. And that's good, so that now the actuator can pivot. It pivots about that much right there, like this, inside the door. Otherwise, it would jam up because the door's coming up on that angle and going out at the same time. It just doesn't come straight up. So it's got to turn a little bit with it. And this one allows it on the mount to turn a little bit. So we got the actuator, we got the rod end on there. The actuator is able to turn. Everything's mounted. Just going to make sure I tighten everybody. So to start the installation, this has got lubricating, some kind of scented material on there. It smells pretty good. It doesn't smell like grease, but it comes in that plastic. At first you don't get it all over you, but then eventually it's everywhere. I also use a motor controller, which is another Autolock product. It's a 2-motor control, and it's programmable. So what it's going to do is, I'll be able to, with the instructions, you open it up, push the buttons, and then hold power to it for how long you want the motor to run. Once it learns it, that's what it keeps doing. So the door will always open all the way and close all the way, unless something's stuck in there. It's got an automatic feedback that if your arm's in there, it's trying to break your arm, it'll stop it. And then there's, this can be controlled off a push button on the inside or the outside of the car. I use a remote, just a remote keyless entry that just gives a ground signal to this, and it will activate the actuator on both sides. So it's a 8-function unit, but I only use 2, one for the driver's and one for the passenger door. You could use it for a lot of other things, the horn, put actuators on the front, on the back of the car, a lot of things that you may want to do. So the next step is going to be to actually install it into the door.